Up next, we have a thought leadership spotlight, and it's about what makes family care effective, defining it and measuring it and making it better. It's a $44 billion problem for employers. Outdated schools of thought rely on backup care and mental health care all by themselves, as if that's supposed to support well-being. But the challenge is that today's families come in all diverse shapes and sizes, including blended, single-parent, multi-generational, and single-person households. Workers who don't fit the traditional mold are often put in the position of trying to get help from systems that weren't really created with them in mind. So in this session, led by Julia Cohen-Sebastian, co-founder and CEO of Grace, you'll discover 5 key shifts needed in family care. Please welcome Julia to the stage.
All right. Thank you, everyone. It's a funny feeling for me, actually, to be here speaking at the Computer Museum. I grew up nearby, and I was the child of 2 computer scientists. And that's probably not the most common thing to hear from a speaker, but I did say 2, right? So that meant my mom was actually a computer scientist, and she faced a lot of biases. Every one of our employees still do. And that was hard for her, and you definitely believe that's why I'm wearing a hot pink blazer at the Computer Museum, bucking some of those biases. But really finding results, and those best results lie in examining and addressing the unexpected. And so that belief has definitely shaped my career. It's why I'm here today, and I want to share a little bit with you today. So I'm Julia Cohen-Sebastian. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Grace. We are a family caregiving solution that supports families globally in taking care of loved ones or even themselves. And I want to talk a little bit about how you define family care, how you measure family care, and how you really make that effective. Okay, so let's kick off with a little game of reverse guess who. So the way you play, pick someone at your table who you don't know and try to guess their family care dynamic. Children, pet rocks, whatever that is, okay? I'll give you a couple minutes. Okay. All right. Wrap it up. All right. For those who paired up, show of hands. How many guessed correctly? How many guessed correctly? Okay. How many guessed incorrectly? All right. Bit more were incorrect than correct. So someone who guessed correctly. You want to raise your hand, let me know. How'd you guess? Please. Leading questions. Good one. Good one. Okay, for those who guessed incorrectly, how far off were you? Someone want to share? Please.
Well, she was way off. She thought I had 2 children. I have none.
Okay.
And, I thought I was married. I've never been married.
Okay.
Just like the total opposite. And it was based off assumptions of American culture, where, you seem like you're a certain age and you're obviously married and have, that whole American story. So, yeah, it was way off.
Indeed. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Totally different story where you were wildly off? Anyone else? No? Okay. Well, how many of you live in a household where there's a mom, a dad, and call it a couple kids? Okay. How many don't? More than half the room, right? So yeah, fewer people than we think actually have what we would expect. So why do we still expect that, right? Pretty omnipresent mental image, isn't it? Right? 1950s. Why do we still think that's the heyday? Right? Why do we still think that family means nuclear family, leave it to Beaver? It's a pretty isolated image. It's pretty hard to make it work with 2 adults and 2 kids in a house, right? A lot of people, that's not how they live anymore. It still persists though. And so, with all of that, right, for a lot of people, their families are changing. What else is changing? No doubt you've heard the expression, sandwich caregiver, right? So in my own family, I've got a toddler with special needs. I've got 2 young adults as stepkids. I have 2 senior parents, both of whom in theory should be helping me to care for my kid, but instead one of them can't lift more than a soup can right now after surgery, and the other one just had surgery and can't walk. So instead I'm caring for most all of them pretty much all the time, right? So for a lot more people, this is really what they're navigating. So that's not just me. My story's actually not very unusual. And each of yours isn't either, right? That's because society is bigger than each of our individual situations. And everything has changed, right? So marriage, kids, did you know those are now the minority situation? And it varies pretty wildly from race or ethnicity to race or ethnicity for what's statistically average. And so a lot of those assumptions that we have in our mind are totally different than the person you may be sitting next to, right? And so if you think about how much marriage and kids are down, then you think about all the news coming out of childcare costs requires 2 incomes. You know what? The Fed has said that the cost of elder care, the impact on the workforce is 4x that of childcare, right? Talk about a way to lose every dime you've made at work. And then you think about multi-generational households or single-generational households, right? Multi-generational households, if you actually go back fully 50 years, my stat is wrong. 4x the frequency that it was 50 years ago. Right? So a lot of people, they're not just caring for kids. They're not just caring for other adults. They're also caring for seniors. Single-person households, right? As an example, that now is nearly 20% of households in the country. So when we think about, is our situation normal? The answer is normal looks pretty different than what we see in the movies from 50 plus years ago. And more change is coming, right? So right now, we are in the midst of a demographic shift we've literally never seen before. We're gonna have more seniors than kids in America in 1 decade. And in the next 4 years, we're gonna have 3 million lacking professional caregivers. Right? That's child care, that's elder care, that's medical care. Who do you think is going to provide that care? Every single employee. And so with that, whoops, then it's unsurprising that care is now the #1 reason why people are leaving the workforce besides early retirement. But we also now have 5 generations in the workforce that are trying to stay in the workforce longer. Many of them also to pay for that care. So what you have is one of the biggest workforce conundrums that we've ever seen. And a lot of how we've looked at this has been through a lens of prior decades. So you think about a lot of the programs that we've put in place, they've been more focused on things like forming families. They've been more focused on things like young families, right? More millennial age. But now we've got Gen Z in the workforce. We even have the silent generation in the workforce. And you have something that's not really just a benefits problem. It is an entire workforce problem from the moment people think about, do they want to work for your company? that brand that you have in the market, to the process of recruiting them, to the process of making them productive, developing them in their careers, preventing them from needing to take leave, reducing medical costs, right? And keeping them. The last several people that I interviewed for my company, every single one of them came to me talking about how they were trying to balance their family at home versus work. And that's why they were looking for the particular type of job. And yes, I do run a caregiving company, but that's actually not why they brought it up. And so for each one of you, right, you all sit in different functions of HR. Every single sub-function of HR has an opportunity and a responsibility to think about care if you want your company to be a high-performing company. It's not just a benefits program. It's not just about leave, right? It's really, how do we help people to be successful at home and to be successful at work, recognizing the economic backdrop that we have now. And so with all of that, there's a lot of different initiatives. There's a lot of different programs that each one of you are championing, that you're asking questions about, that you're driving forward. And there's a lot of things to keep in mind as you think about making that successful, right? So what do we do about these challenges? First things first, right? Think across that entire organization and think about how care is spanning every part of that employee experience. But then think about really beyond life stages. So to some people's points, it's really hard to come up with programs if you literally just think about what age or stage an employee's at. So for example, think about everyone in your population who might be a high cost claimant, right, who might have high medical costs, people navigating illness. Every single one of those employees has care happening in the home. Right? You think about those who are navigating disabilities, they don't fit so neatly in that ages or stages kind of framework, do they? So think beyond the words child care or elder care, because there's a lot of care across every age and stage that's not captured there. And then think about extended family, right? So for a lot of folks, it's not just about who lives in the house. It might be a loved one who lives afar, maybe even in a different country. It might be someone who's not an immediate family member in their household. It could even be chosen family, right? And for many people, if we're talking about accepting that diversity, we need to recognize that those chosen families are just as valuable as blood relatives, because for many people, that's just an element of their circumstance and what matters to them. Yeah. So in terms of thinking about those local and global connections, right? Family knows no boundaries. Think about trying to come up with a program where everything is totally limited to dependent care government restrictions. Right? You miss a lot of families, don't you? So we actually see this at Grace. People call us all the time who are caring for loved ones in another state, in another country, people who are not necessarily related to, might even be, say, an aunt. Thinking about how you support those folks, not just with restricted things like dependent care programs or child-oriented programs, but really thinking about how do you help people with more virtually oriented supports and solutions that are relevant to their local context. And then think beyond physical or backup care. Did you know that over 80% of care is delivered by family, friends, or neighbors? Who's actually using the backup care programs? It's a subset of those employees. Have you examined who they are? And whether or not you choose to hire someone from outside the home, which keep in mind, certain cultures are more open to doing than others, then beyond that, there's everything else. There's financial and legal support. There's administrative support. There's other types of medical support. And there are ways to support that go beyond backup care. Okay? And then, of course, address DE&I. Now, that sounds quite simple, but keeping in mind everything from chosen family to whether someone is likely to hire help from outside the home, to whether they feel more emotionally burdened by expectations of them in caring for certain loved ones. All of those things end up affecting whether we're likely to seek certain types of help, whether we're likely to use it, and the type of benefit that we actually receive from it. And so think about those who may not be showing up and using particular programs or policies that you've put in place, and ask where they are if they're in your workforce, right? Take a look at who's using your programs and your policies. I can't tell you how many employers I've worked with where they survey the entire population, but then once they actually have people using it, they want to know what that looks like in aggregate, but then they don't necessarily want to spend time understanding who exactly is using it and who exactly is not. And what type of results do we see for each of those populations? And how do those results actually drive an ROI? So all of that starts from, what are you solving for? Right? The number of people who say, I need to address care, this is a really big issue. I'm going to go find a caregiving program. I'm going to extend this leave. And they put it out there, and they want to see people use it, and they want to see that people are happy with it. But then they stop. Now's the time. This is a big enough topic. This is a topic enough employees want, enough employees are using, that it's time to take the next step and take a look at exactly what are you solving for. Is it retention? Is it productivity? Is it inclusion and equity? Is it reducing medical costs? Is it mitigating leave? You can measure each of those things, and you can look at for which segment of your population that is the case. Right? And I promise you, if you do that, because for the clients that we do that with, we do actually see there are differences in these different populations. When you are willing to take a look at that, you will see that you find the unexpected. And so I encourage each of you, whatever your role in HR, go back to your leaders and say this is a priority topic that you want to address. Ask questions you don't know the answers to. And dig in on how should we really measure whether or not this is working? What are the questions we should ask? What are the data points we should look at? And which employees are benefiting? And for those who did not come forward, why not? Ask the question and you'll find the unexpected. And that's where you find progress. Thank you. Feel free to come chat with us.